children are capable of far more than you've ever imagined. Children will play down to an institutionalized system, but if freed along with structure and responsibility and systems they will build, are capable of incredible things.
You know, in the Michaela School, which takes a very different approach to you, in the UK, it's an inner city school. And there's a wide range of general cognitive ability as a consequence. So you can imagine in a typical class of 30 kids, there would be kids with an IQ of 90 on the low end, likely up to maybe 85 on the low end, and then maybe up to 130 on the high end, right? So a real distribution. But they're teaching at a very high rate, and 75% of their graduates get accepted to Russell Group universities in the UK. And Russell Group includes the big UK universities. So they've managed to set up a system where, regardless of that immense variability in innate intelligence, let's say, there's tremendous emphasis on rapid learning.
Well, so here's where we might differ a bit, or at least what we've discovered. And what we've discovered is, IQ, no question, is the most important determiner of success or socioeconomic success. But it's still only, 25%?
Yeah,
right?
It seems about 25%.
So what we found is, regardless of IQ, if we can build a tribe where every person there believes that they have a calling to change the world, that there is a place in that tribe. Now, if my IQ is 100, I'm not going to be doing three-body orbital problems.
Right.
I mean, I just can't
Advanced physics.
Right. Frankly, I can't do that, right? So that's okay. There's other things I can do. So what we've found is there's very little variability in the ability to learn to do things if you provide people with a compelling story and reason. If you provide them with a recipe, which is now you can find a recipe for anything on the internet, and if you provide them with some sort of rubric so they can among themselves judge it, and you provide them with some gamification, some way to keep score that's fun, it builds a tribe. It builds a tribe. And if you can do that, and we do this in groups of 36, the tribe is so complex and interesting, it's all about the tribe. Once the tribe works, we get learning happening at a 2 to 3 times average rate. And most importantly, the academic subjects become unimportant. They all happen. I mean, it happens at a rapid rate. But you're learning self-management, self-governance, and how to get along with people and build a culture. And you can have all the artificial intelligence you want. It can't do those 3 things.
So now let's go back to when you started building this school and walk through it step by step, because I'd really like to understand more deeply how these schools operate. I know in the Michaela School that I referred to, it's very structured. And the teachers do the guiding, and it's clear that the teachers are the ones in control. And I was very impressed when I went there, and her results are also very impressive. The children are very secure, and they're very pleased to be there. We had about 6 of them take us around, and they were just randomly selected from the school population. And I asked them a lot of questions. And so they're liking this. You're taking an approach that also requires the children to participate in their own self-organization. So you could imagine that you could have a system where the basic rules of engagement are established by the authorities, but the game is actually playable. Or you could have a system where the game that's looser, which would be the system that you set up, where the demand for self-governance is placed in there to a large degree at the beginning.
And so this is very similar to a Tocquevillian society that develops from the bottom up. We are providing, though, they don't have to invent democracy or a democratic republic or a tyrannical government. We'll provide them with choices, so you don't have to invent everything from a blank sheet. But by experimenting, it's a very Hayekian, from the bottom up series of experiments, and they learn by doing. And I will tell you that the environment is, it's tyranny one week and Lord of the Flies the next, and they learn to find a medium between freedom and responsibility. And they're continually working on the society.
Okay, so what would the experience like? So how young? What's the youngest children that you have in the program?
The youngest will be preschool.
Okay,
so
5,
4, 5, 6.
Okay, so what do they experience their first day of school?
Okay, so at that age group, it differs a little bit. So there's 36 in the room. It's mostly Montessori-like learning to do real work, so the routines of real work, and free play. And it's only, and so you're beginning to learn to read and write, and I'll get back to that in a minute.
Okay.
Elementary studio is more about important work. So you're doing real chores, you're doing real work, you're helping to start running the studio, and you're playing hard games. And that hard game may be learning math, but it's a hard game. I mean, like, so these are games. Now, by middle school, you know, you're tackling real world things. You're beginning apprenticeships as early as age 11 or 12. And so you're actually beginning to take those talents out in the real world. So it changes from studio to studio.
Right. So it starts to broaden.
Right.
So what happens with children's games is that as the children mature, the games become more and more like real world occupations. Right?
That's what we're doing.
And then, you know, you could also say, interestingly enough, on the adult side, the more you can turn your real world occupation into a genuine child's game, the better you are at it. So it's weird how those things meet.
Well, and that's part of playing this is the realization, if you're always saying, we believe you're a hero who's going to change the world, here's a story about Martin Luther King. Here's a story about, so when I said there's a why to doing this, you're continually being given archetypal hero, real world stories of flawed heroes, right? Not perfect heroes. And you're having to work this out at the same time you're working out whether I'm going to hit you in the head at age 5. And if I do, there are consequences. But those consequences are largely meted out by 8-year-olds who are forming their society and learning to form their society. And I will tell you, in our high schoolers and our middle schoolers, 80% of them are better than anybody that graduated from my Harvard Business School class in culture. Because all they
better
do
at what?
At culture, at forming a healthy culture.
Right. So is that better at negotiating?
It's negotiating, it's caring. I'll give you a quick example of how you move up. So no grades. The standards are held by the community. Very high standards. But here's how they work. You keep track of the work you've done and you earn points. That's effort. So how much effort are you putting in? Every 6 weeks, there's a public exhibition. The public's invited. It's not a science fair. It's going to be an exhibition of learning. For example, if we're doing the medical biology quest, these young people will be diagnosing diseases of people coming in who have a stack of cards that are their disease. And the winner of the game most accurately diagnoses real diseases for real with real cost. So what do they learn? They learn to manage their own health care, which in the United States is
so
probably
you reward progress, but you actually have standards of attainment at the same time.
Yes.
See, there's an overlap between what you're doing in the Michaela School because they're also extremely good at rewarding both progress and actual levels of attainment.
And so the attainment here is, did most of your patients live at a low cost? And through that, you're going to learn to actually listen and diagnose diseases, even for yourself. So badges are attainment, public exhibition, points are effort. Last piece, which is important, is 360 peer reviews. Every person's asked, is Dr. Peterson warm-hearted 1 to 10? Or is Dr. Peterson tough-minded enough 1 to 10? And then I give you feedback, and it can't be, you're stupid. It can be, you know, when you interrupt me when I'm working hard, that's really frustrating. Would you please, when I have the red flag up, not interrupt me when I'm working hard. So I'm requesting, so I'm learning how to be a good friend, a good citizen.
Okay, so now you've got, so
those are the
three things happening. So you've got reward for progress, you've got an absolute standard of attainment, and then you've also got something like evaluation of the manner in which you conduct yourself within the culture, within the group. Okay, so in the 360 process, just for those of you who are watching and listening, is that it's not that easy to figure out how to evaluate people inside a corporation. So for example, if you're trying to evaluate middle managers, you can't get a direct measure of their sales effectiveness because they're 3 steps removed from any sales process. And so the question is, well, how do you know if they're succeeding and how do they know? That's a big question because you can't even get rewarded unless you know what the criteria are for success and failure. And so one of the ways that corporations have learned to deal with this that's actually quite effective is by doing these processes they call 360s. And in a 360, your subordinates rate you and give you feedback, your peers do, and your superiors do. And so then that's aggregated. And you can set that up so that it's not, so it's as unbiased with relationship to the hypothetically desirable outcomes as you can manage. But it's an effective way. Compiling multiple reports like that is an effective way of gaining valid, say, diagnostic information.
And a great way to learn to give and receive valid criticism.
Right.
That it's helpful criticism, it's positive criticism.
Right.
So
yes, and criticism, we should also point out, that's not, here's what you're doing wrong. That's, here's what you're doing really right. Because the core of criticism is what you're doing right.
Yes.
But here are things you're doing that, as far as we can tell, are interfering with what you're doing right. It's a separating of the wheat from the chaff.
And that's why almost all of what's offered at the school is growth mindset praise. We appreciate the method of what you're doing. Now, again, adults can't do this. Adults can never make a declarative sentence on campus. Adults can only ask questions. And there are very few adults, because the young people run everything.